sees the contradiction. The state she supports has itself shown exactly how expendable its heroes are.
Everyone thinks those millions they pay out are a fair price for the death of their son. So that's the value that someone, somewhere, has placed on our children's lives.
Thanks for listening. Assignment was presented by me, Arseny Sokolov, and produced by Tim Hewell.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning. We're just ahead of World Report here on CBC, and then Information Radio is right after that. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. We begin with a look at our headlines this morning and the CBC's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the daughter of one of 4 murdered Indigenous women feels conflicted after yesterday's public apology from the Progressive Conservatives. Tory interim leader Wayne Iwasko stood in the legislature apologizing to the families. He says his party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families. We're going to hear what one family member has to say about that apology coming up. As well, the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association says the trade war is hitting the industry hard. The association CEO says many restaurant owners are still recovering from the pandemic and massive inflation, and for some, tariffs may be the final straw. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather Wells, in the CBC Winnipeg newsroom for us. Our morning crew is Corey Funk, our show director, who also covers the commute for us. Good morning, Corey. Abby Adiyemi is our technical producer and covers the weather, which again is another mixed bag. I see, Abby. Good morning to you. And our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo. Hello, Kevin. Nice to see everybody. As I mentioned, I'm Margot in from Marcy, and a busy show we have for you. Of course, tariffs. Lots of discussion about tariffs and what has happened this week and what is still yet to come. We'll take a closer look at how the potential U.S. tariffs on Canadian agriculture products could affect Canada's agriculture industry. Heather mentioned how Manitoba restaurants are also thinking of these tariffs and what it will mean for their business. We'll hear from the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association, and we'll find out what they are doing to try to help local restaurants survive the U.S.-Canada trade war. Also coming up in the first half hour of our program after 6 o'clock, the 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Paralympics are 1 year away from kicking off in Italy. We'll have a preview of how climate change may affect the competition, and we'll also look at some of the para-athletes likely to be making headlines for Canada. We're looking at a sunny day, but chilly with that wind. Right now it is minus 7 degrees at the Forks, and World Report is next.
On cue. The actor Amanda Seyfried got a lot of attention for starring in the movie Mean Girls and then singing ABBA in Mamma Mia. Everything changed when she got cast in a movie by the director Adam Egoyan. Amanda will tell you how it was Canadian film that changed her life and gave her her dream career. Q with Tom Power, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Industries in Canada are looking for clarity from the Trump administration in regards to the newly imposed tariffs. It is day 3 of the trade war between Canada and the U.S. There's just more confusion. The auto industry has already been granted a 1-month reprieve. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, farmers in the U.S. are also hoping for some tariff relief. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Republican lawmakers from those deep red farm country states are pressuring the White House to exempt agricultural products from those 25% tariffs, including Canadian potash, which is a key ingredient in fertilizer. Now, they're concerned tariffs could lead to a supply shortage or price hikes that would drive up food prices. The Agriculture Secretary says it's being considered, but that wildly contradicts the message from Vice President J.D. Vance, who said his boss, President Donald Trump, is not interested in specific exemptions to specific sectors.
He doesn't want to have 500 different industries getting 500 different carve-outs. And the way to avoid application of the tariffs is to have your factory and have your facility in the United States of America. That is the way. Invest in America.
Now, you'll recall Trump paused the upcoming tariffs on all car imports built under the USMCA trade agreement for a month. This came after he heard concerns from the big three automakers. So while this mixed messaging from the White House is adding more confusion for Canadian and Mexican negotiators, it does signal this administration is willing to make critical policy decisions on a dime. Some might call it the art of the deal.
You mentioned the auto industry, but what's the status of the carve-outs for other sectors?
Yeah, so the White House press secretary says Trump is open to hearing of additional exemptions, saying the president is always and has always been having open dialogue. But then she quickly said Trump's reciprocal tariffs will still take effect next month with no exceptions. So all this volatility is being reflected by the markets. That's either plunged or inched up in reaction to each tariff update. I think the news site Axios sums it up best, saying it's not just the actual tariffs that pose a risk to the economy, but the uncertainty of their implementation.
Thank you, Richard.
Anytime. Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. As trade walls go up south of the border, premiers are wanting them to come down within Canada. Provincial and territorial leaders see reducing trade barriers as a way to grow GDP. The CBC's Kate McKenna has more on this from Ottawa. And Kate, this push to reduce interprovincial trade barriers is being called unprecedented. What can you tell us about it?
Federal and provincial governments agreed this is the time to remove provincial trade barriers, and they're ready to move quickly. They issued a statement last night saying, among other things, they want to make it easier for workers to travel across the country and have their credentials recognized. Here's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith making that commitment.
My government will enter into free trade and labor mobility agreements with every province that is willing to do so. The goal is to have no exceptions, just free trade and free movement of Canadian workers right across our province.
The statement also says most premiers are ready to remove barriers to alcohol sales, meaning no matter where you are in the country, you could buy wine or beer from any province. This big push on interprovincial trade is an effort to make Canada's economy more resilient in the face of these tariffs. The Minister of Internal Trade, Anita Anand, says eliminating trade barriers could add up to $200 billion to the Canadian GDP. This issue has frustrated business leaders for decades. They say it's easier to trade with the U.S. than within Canadian provinces. We've heard from many premiers a willingness to change this. Representatives are meeting weekly now to lift these trade barriers. But of course, Canada's main goal is and always has been having these tariffs lifted.
All right. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Kate McKenna in Ottawa. Residents of a South Korean city are demanding answers after 2 fighter jets accidentally bombed the area.
민간 지역에 포탄이 떨어진
This man is calling for accountability, accusing the Air Force of negligence. The incident happened in Pocheon near the North Korean border. The military was carrying out a live fire drill. 2 planes strayed outside the firing range and dropped 8 bombs. A church and a number of houses were damaged. No one was killed, but 15 people were injured. A Russian missile attack has targeted Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, killing 4 people. The strike in Kryvyi Rih happened as Zelensky prepares for an emergency meeting with European leaders in Brussels today. Ahead of the summit, France's Emmanuel Macron is warning Europe. Anna Cunningham has more from London.
French President Emmanuel Macron in a nationwide televised address last night warning that President Vladimir Putin's Russia violates our borders, making clear peace across Europe was at risk. Its fate, he says, could not be decided by Washington. Today's meeting in Brussels follows a plan by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to rearm Europe. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend, his country now under increased pressure after President Donald Trump suspended US military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv. Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Brez says to ensure peace, countries must invest.
We want to realize that our kids will be able to study, our dreams will be fulfilled, and so on and so forth. So yes, for now it requires certain investment.
Discussions will centre on a large boost in EU defence spending, including investment in the manufacturing of weapons.
This is about Russia wanting to wipe Ukraine off the map, but it is also about Russia wanting to wipe the current European security order off the map.
Says Fabian Zuleg, Chief Executive at the European Policy Centre.
We will have to collectively defend Ukraine.
Many European nations are expected to be supportive, with the exception of leaders sympathetic to the Kremlin, such as Hungary's Viktor Orban. In a show of the deep level of concern, President Macron has suggested extending the protection offered by France's nuclear arsenal to European partners, something Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says is a threat to Russia. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Millions of people in Australia are getting ready for a rare tropical storm. Cyclone Alfred is expected to make landfall this weekend on the east coast near Brisbane. As Phil Mercer reports, Alfred is bringing with it the threat of severe flooding.
For some thrill seekers, the large waves that have begun pounding parts of Australia's east coast are a novelty. But the authorities are warning that Cyclone Alfred will be incredibly dangerous. Brisbane's Mayor Adrian Schrinner is urging millions of Australians in the storm zone to stay at home.
I don't want to see one single person electrocuted. I don't want to see one single person impacted by flying debris. And the best way we can make that happen is for everyone to stay at home for the next 2 days at the very least.
Southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales residents face a nervous wait as tropical cyclone Alfred's arrival is pushed back to Saturday morning.
The military has been brought in to help as the storm continues its erratic path to the coast. Many residents have laid sandbags to protect their homes, and there's been panic buying in supermarkets. Homeowners are doing what they can to prepare.
We've done everything we can in terms of securing the house and our belongings and everything like that. But I think we're just going to try and hunker down and see it out and hope for the best.
Alfred could dump about 800 millimetres of rain in parts of Queensland and New South Wales. Phil Mercer for CBC News, Sydney.
Patients of a gynecologist in Toronto are furious. They received a notice from Toronto Public Health saying they may have been exposed to infection. As Talia Ricci reports, the letter says it was through improper cleaning of medical instruments.
I felt very violated.
Zara Baksh says a lot went through her mind when she received a letter from Toronto Public Health saying she may have been exposed to bloodborne infections at her gynecologist office.
I mean, I was enraged. I think I spent most of the day just in shock.
The issue was reported at Dr. Esther Park's clinic in the West End of Toronto. Toronto Public Health told CBC News it notified approximately 2,500 patients that received specific procedures between 2020 and 2024 that they might have been exposed to an infection, saying certain bloodborne infections such as hepatitis B and hepatitis C can be passed through the reuse of improperly cleaned instruments. Toronto Public Health says it believes the risk of transmission to be low, but that didn't put Amal Al-Sheikh at ease. She says she was so distraught when she received the notice that she didn't go into work.
So the letter, I was panicking. Like, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to tell my family.
The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario says it's investigating Dr. Park in relation to infection control issues in her practice. Baksh's test results came back negative, but she still wants answers.
I want to see justice, and I don't know what that looks like.
CBC News contacted the clinic, and a staff member said they wouldn't be providing a comment. The office's answering machine states that Dr. Park is retiring and no longer accepting new patients, and that the clinic will be closing in April. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime. CBCNews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, this time next year, the Winter Paralympics will kick off in Milan Cortina, Italy. Ahead on the show, a chat with CBC sports writer Miles Dichter about what's different about these games and how para-athletes from this country are preparing for the big event. We'll hear from the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association. They're trying to help local restaurants survive the U.S.-Canada trade war. And the uncertainty surrounding potential tariffs on Canadian agricultural imports to the U.S. is creating a lot of pressure for farmers on both sides of the border. This is Information Radio on CBC. Let's get the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, as tariffs add to the cost of certain imports from the United States, a Winnipeg restaurant is making some changes. U.S. produce is used in almost every menu item at Peasant Cookery in the exchange. The general manager there says now they will be looking to buy local. For instance, like sourcing tomatoes from a greenhouse in the Dauphin area. We'll hear more about that. And remembering a homicide victim 4 years later. Dozens gathered in a vigil yesterday for Jana Williams. Her remains were found outside a Winnipeg apartment building on Alfred Avenue in 2021. Her mother says it's been years since she last received an update on the case. Those stories and more coming up in your next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at the weather now with Abby. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margot. How did it feel stepping out this morning?
Felt a little brisk.
Yeah, a little brisk, and that's the condition. Though that clear skies we're seeing will make it really feel appealing to step outside this morning. Down south, we have clear conditions. Up north, we have light snow falling. The southern regions will enjoy sunny skies, while the northern part of the province, Thompson Churchill, will be seeing a light snow and harsher wind chills, making it even feel colder. But looking at conditions for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, right now in the city, -8, clear skies we're seeing. Expect plenty of sunshine today. It's going to get a little bit breezy from the west. A high will get to -4, and then later in the evening we'll see some clouds roll in. There's a little chance of light snow late tonight before some clearing tomorrow morning. But in other regions, the province will see sunshine down south. Highs will range from -3 to -5, while up north expect colder temperatures. The highs will be struggling to reach -10 in the Par and Thompson, while Churchill will stay well below -20 with extreme wind chills, making it feel colder. But for Winnipeg today, sunny day ahead, a bit of light breeze, and we get to -4.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey is watching the commute for us as always. Hey, you.
Hello. Yes. Overall, so far, I haven't heard of any major issues. I can tell you those sidewalks are sneaky slippery today because there's that light dusting of snow.
Sneaky slippery.
Sneaky slippery because there's that light dusting, and so you're like, maybe they're grippy, but then all of a sudden you're like, whoop. So that was my experience on the way in today, at least. But if you're out there, if that's the case on the roads, let's hope not. But let me know what you're seeing out there. If there's some drifting snow, visibility is an issue. Would love to hear from you so I can let your fellow listeners know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
We can circle March 6th of next year on our calendars as the start of the 2026 Winter Paralympics. The International Multisport Games will showcase some 600 athletes competing across 6 sports. They'll be competing in 79 medal events in para-alpine skiing, biathlon, cross-country skiing, ice hockey, snowboard, and wheelchair curling. Here to set up the event for us, which will mark the 50th anniversary of the first Paralympic Winter Games, is Mile Dichter. He's a freelance contributor to CBC Sports Online, and he's in Toronto. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. What are some of the big differences between the Paralympic Winter Games program and the Olympic Winter Games?
Yeah, the Paralympics are called that because they're parallel to the Olympics. So I'm actually going to start with some of the similarities. The main thing being you speak to any Paralympic athlete, and the one thing they want you to know is that they train hard for these games, just as hard, if not harder, than their Olympic counterparts. So it's 4 years leading up to this one period of time. Of course, there are plenty of differences as well. Paralympics, of course, for people with disabilities, that could be anything from a visual impairment to a limb deficiency to an intellectual impairment. The number of athletes at the Paralympics is about 660 compared to 3,000 at the Olympics. Half the amount of countries are expected to compete. there's far fewer sport disciplines, and there's even different mascots. Tina at the Olympics, Milo at the Paralympics, but the same intense competition throughout.
And what would you say is different about these particular Paralympic Winter Games compared to previous editions?
Yeah, I'd say that athletes you speak with really say these games can be almost a breath of fresh air. You think back to 3 years ago in Beijing, it's COVID, there's no family there, there's no fans in the stands, you can't interact with your competitors or your teammates outside of the field to play pretty much. And then even before that, Pyeongchang 2018, Sochi 2014, those are pretty much halfway across the world for Canadian athletes, which means they're competing at weird hours back home. Now back in Italy, a country that loves its winter sports, it feels sort of almost like a relief for these athletes to be back, maybe even for the first time since the Olympics and Paralympics were held in Vancouver in 2010. For the first time, it can be just a full-fledged celebration of what parasport will be. And on the program, there's a new event as well, wheelchair mixed doubles curling, which should present another medal opportunity for Canada as well.
Now, it's expected climate change and warming temperatures could put a damper on the party for organizers. What kind of weather situation might we see in northern Italy?
Well, the opening ceremony of the Paralympics is exactly a month later than the Olympics. And so climate change might affect the Paralympics even more than the Olympics. I was speaking with Natalie Wilkie, a para-Nordic skier for Canada recently, and that team is expecting slushy conditions, which means the races are going to be slower. They've been preparing for it. They've been racing in different wet snow kind of thing. They've even, it's expected to be 20 degrees Celsius in Italy when they compete. That's not the type of condition winter athletes are used to competing in, right? So they've taken bandanas and filled them with ice and put them around their necks to help cool them down. The one maybe saving grace of this all is that Italy's used to having artificial snow on the ski slopes. 90% of Italy's ski slopes rely on artificial snow. So while this is an issue and will prevent or cause some problems, the infrastructure is there to deal with it.
It's really interesting when you talk about them wearing the ice, like some real challenges as they do their training, preparing for these events.
Yeah, every game brings its own challenges, and for anyone you speak to, that is sort of the main one heading into Italy right now.
Still a year out, but at this point, who are the Canadian athletes likely to grab some attention?
Well, for years, the answer to this question would have been Brian McKeever, a Canadian Paralympic legend who retired after the 2022 Beijing Games as an athlete, but transitioned into coaching and will still be in Italy, sort of stepping into his role as the athlete veteran leader is Mark Arends of the Para-Nordic team. It'll be his 5th Paralympics. He's already earned 12 medals and even had a provincial park named after him in PEI. Competing next to him is Natalie Wilkie, who I mentioned earlier. She was the youngest athlete on Team Canada in 2018. 7 Paralympic medals later, she'll be a veteran in Italy. Tyler Turner, really cool guy, loves extreme sports. Won Canada's first para snowboard gold medal 3 years ago. He'll be back to defend that. And Raphael Toussignon is out to make history as the first woman to compete on Team Canada in para ice hockey at the Paralympics.
That's great. Miles, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Okay, thanks for having me.
That's Miles Dichter, a freelance contributor to CBC Sports Online. You can keep up to date on the lead up to the 2026 Milan Cortina Paralympics on CBC Sports platforms, including 6 daily streaming feeds available on cbcsports.ca, CBC Gem, and the CBC Sports app for iOS and Android.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
It is 6:20, minus 7 degrees at the Forks with a wind chill of about minus 19 this morning, so still bundle up season. In the wake of the newly imposed U.S. tariffs, many local industries are scrambling to figure out how they will affect prices and how to mitigate the new cost of doing business. They're also voicing concerns over what potential counter tariffs could mean for businesses that rely on American products. That uncertainty has hit local restaurants, too. So just how will this trade war impact your favorite eateries? Sean Jeffrey is the CEO of the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association. He spoke yesterday with Up to Speed's Faith Fundal.
What has been the biggest question or the biggest issue that you've had to try to address with your industry folks?
I think it's really around the uncertainty. Obviously, this was, in the previous round of this, it was pulled down at the 11th hour. So, we weren't even quite sure if it was going to happen. And so, obviously, the preparation, although it was there, was very delayed because we needed to make sure that we were prepared but not prepared at the same time. So, because we didn't want to do a whole bunch of work like last time, chasing down suppliers and changing our business models and so forth to be able to not have to go through with it. So I think that uncertainty is there too. And then obviously now that the tariffs have put in place, really scrambling to try to find ways to adapt our business to the potential for retaliatory tariffs on what that means to us and things we purchase like chicken and produce and non-perishables. But furthermore, even the alcohol removal of U.S. alcohol from the shelves and what that looks like in replacing that and if there is going to be a supply chain to be able to do so. So, yeah, a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people trying to get information and get answers to questions that haven't been really asked yet.
And part of that uncertainty also includes counter tariffs, right? Well, what's your sense of how counter tariffs, while it is something that many analysts say needs to happen, do you know yet how that will impact your folks?
Massive. Absolutely massive. Yeah, we're when we think about all the products that we purchase, especially when you look at things like produce, fruits, and vegetables, with our climate here in the Great White North, we buy a lot of products like that from the United States. And so, be able to either A, resource those locally, and B, being able to resource enough of them locally. And on top of that, what that looks like, what's that additional cost? And so if there's an additional cost, how do we relate that back to the consumers? Because our industry's reeling from the pandemic, still, reeling after years of massive inflation increases. And so I think that, we've really come to a situation where we've absorbed a lot of these cost increases over the last 5 years. How much more can we absorb? And what does that look like in even putting us even more in the red?
Do your members have an answer to those questions?
No, we do. We're trying. It's in the old days when our industry, we would have some owners and some operators that would be out rushing to do this and try to prepare themselves. Those owners are now working in the dish area. They're cooking, they're serving tables, they're bartending. So now they're doing all of that while trying to, prepare their business for these changes. And they're pretty significant in our industry. And look, over 50% of our industry is not even making any money. We're breaking even or losing money. So when you start implementing additional costs, whether it be, removal of U.S. alcohol and having to purchase a more expensive Canadian product, or adding a 25% tariff on the things that we purchase every day, that is driving a lot of businesses that are in the red already more into the red, and driving restaurants that are we're in the black, just minorly in the black, definitely into the red. So it's really going to expedite our ability to be profitable and viable for the future. Absolutely.
Do you have members, owner-operators who have the capacity and have already started removing American products from their menus?
Well, we would say some, yes, if you can. The reality is that we purchase these products just like every other Manitoban. When we buy it, we pay for it. So it's sitting on our shelves. And in order to service our customers, we would have to purchase it again and then have that product sit on a shelf for we don't know how long. So again, in the old days, pre-pandemic and before that, we could absolutely do that. But when you have 53% of your industry losing money every single month, every single day, looking at that $35 or $40 bottle of alcohol and just saying, I'm not going to use that, and then going and buying it again is just not feasible anymore. So we're looking to our provincial government. We've been sharing these feedback with them, looking for ways to try to have supports on buying local. Look, there's not an industry in the world that wants to support local more than the restaurant industry. We do it every day. But it's just about the ability to be able to do it in a viable manner that we don't have to pass that on to customers. And we did it as small as possible while trying to keep our business afloat.
Sean, for people who have not gone through the very technical list on both the U.S. tariffs and the Canadian counter tariffs, what things are we talking about here?
Beef, chicken, produce, oranges, lettuce. You're looking at, obviously, alcohol. You're looking at things like takeout containers, spoons. Manitoba has some of the highest rated delivery in the country with the companies like Skip the Dishes. So takeout containers are all purchased from the U.S., especially if they're biodegradable. And these items are, we're not quite sure how much is being tariffed on them and what's being included and not, because it's just implemented recently on the weekend. But speaking with our suppliers, a lot of them are going to be, part of that. And so those are major challenges, especially when these things are, they're already increased so significantly, almost double digits since the pandemic in cost alone already. So increasing them another 25% it's pretty monumental to a business that may be just breaking even or making no money at all.
We've heard about some supports. The Manitoba provincial government has talked about tax deferrals. The federal government is considering other relief. If this continues on, I mean, how long do you have before you start seeing folks who you represent closing up shop?
Not very long. Not very long, and for twofold. Number one, because of the profit margins are just not there and haven't been for a long time. And two, because it is just another, it's another shot to the moral that, that we have in our industry and be able to operate a business and that brings out, people for fun and with family and friends. So, the decisions are being made regularly, and we don't know how long this is going to last. Obviously, the uncertainty with the counterparts in the U.S. is just mind blowing. But it's that uncertainty is just another. Is it that final nail in the coffin that an operator just says enough's enough. I just can't do this anymore. We had those decisions are being made quite regularly. So don't know and hope it's very little to none. Look, our provincial government has been great in communicating so far. Have been since elected. But with that being said, I don't think that this is a time for twiddling our thumbs. I think it's time for action. And these things are going to be immediately impacting our industry. This is not something we can wait 6 to 12 months for. That's just not acceptable.
Sean Jeffrey is the CEO of the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association. He was speaking with Faith Fundal.
A really thin computer led to a big PR problem.
Oh boy.
A seasonal candle fired up consumers with some questionable imagery. And that's not the correct URL printed on the packaging of a children's doll.
Uh-oh.
Recorded before a live audience in Toronto, Wicked Brand Fails of 2024 on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
We are at minus 8 degrees at the Forks at this hour. We're looking at sunshine today in the forecast, but still a wind chill of minus 19 for this morning. Maybe some light snow tonight and then back to sunshine tomorrow with a high of minus 5. Traffic-wise, if you see anything that other drivers ought to know about, we welcome your calls on our traffic line. That is 788-3093. Still to come here on Information Radio, the uncertainty surrounding potential tariffs on Canadian agriculture imports to the U.S. It's creating a lot of pressure for farmers on both sides of the border. We'll find out what's at stake for producers, especially here in Manitoba. That's coming up after the news. You're with Information Radio. I'm Marco Watt in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Good morning. Nice to have you with us. Time now for CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It's minus 8. We're going to warm up just a little bit in Winnipeg today, a high of minus 4. It is going to be sunny, bit of a westerly breeze as well this afternoon. The daughter of one of 4 murdered Indigenous women feels conflicted after yesterday's public apology from the Progressive Conservatives. Interim Tory leader Wayne Iwasko stood in the legislature and apologized to the families. He says his party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families. The Tories refused to search the landfill where it's believed 2 of the bodies were dumped. Just last week, searchers found potential human remains, which are now being tested. Cambria Harris questions the timing of the apology. She also wonders about the sincerity of it being made in public.
Absolutely. When you apologize publicly, it takes away all personality to the situation and reality to the situation because you're not facing it.
Harris says she filed a discrimination complaint against the Tories more than a year ago. She says the party had ample time to mediate with her in private. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the premiers have started the process of eliminating certain barriers on interprovincial trade and labor mobility. Among the issues being looked at are the credentials certified professionals need to work outside their home province. Provincial trade and labor ministers have been directed to come up with a national credential plan by June 1st. However, Quebec says it will need more time, saying its language laws will be difficult to negotiate. In Manitoba, some business owners are concerned about increased costs due to this trade war with the U.S. Michelle Leclerc owns Wolseley Kombucha. She says their packaging will be directly impacted by counter tariffs because all of their bottles come from the U.S. Leclerc says their bottle order shipments are worth thousands of dollars, meaning a hit to their bottom line.
Grab-and-go bottles are probably about, I would say, 40% of our business, and margins are tight. So if it goes up 25%, that's eating 25% of our bottom line for that product. That's a lot.
Leclerc says they may look at different suppliers from countries like China or Mexico to keep costs low. A Winnipeg restaurant, meanwhile, is looking at major changes as it deals with Canada's counter tariffs. Meat, dairy products, fruit and vegetables, if they're from the United States, could be a 25% addition to the costs. At Peasant Cookery in the Exchange, almost every menu item includes some sort of American produce. General Manager Flora Giordani says they have to make changes.
Lettuce or arugula. We put arugula on everything just to, put a little bit on top or put it under. We're going to change a lot of things. It's going to be a lot of work.
Giordani says they will be sourcing all their produce from Canada moving forward. For example, they're looking at ordering tomatoes grown in a greenhouse in the Dauphin area. Giordani says going Canada first means the menu will have to change as different products become available. In other news, remembering a homicide victim 4 years later. Dozens at a vigil yesterday for Jana Williams. Her remains were found outside a Winnipeg apartment building on Alfred Avenue in 2021. Her family says the mother of 3 was expecting another child when she died. Charlene Williams is Jana's mother.
She was an outgoing person. She helped everyone. She loved everyone. And she just loved life and loved her children and loved her family. She loved everyone.
Winnipeg police ruled Jana's death a homicide in 2021, but Williams says it has been years since she last received an update on the case. CBC News has reached out to police but has not yet heard back. A Russian missile attack has targeted Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, killing 4 people. Emergency crews rescuing a wounded person from a hotel that was hit. The strike in Kryvyi happened as Zelensky prepares for an emergency meeting with European leaders in Brussels today. Ahead of the summit, France's Emmanuel Macron is warning Europe. He says the continent can no longer count on support from the U.S., adding the continent is at a turning point in history. You can hear more on that story as well as more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The man behind the iconic Canadian beer ad is back with a new patriotic rallying cry. Back in 2000, Jeff Douglas became a national sensation after appearing as the flannel-wearing Joe Canadian in a Molson Canadian commercial. He is now back with a new video in response to the U.S. tariff war.
They think they can bully us, threaten us, and push us around, but they do not know us. That artificially drawn line they keep talking about, not artificial, and it's not on a map.
Douglas is now a CBC radio host in Nova Scotia. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, such an interesting story with Jeff Douglas. I heard an interview with him recently, and he was talking about how when he did that commercial back in the day, he just had no idea what it would become and how it just became a life-changing event for him. And here it is all over again.
All over again, just when we need it, hey? It's
you,
so
Heather.
funny how it invokes so many different feelings as you watch it, like pride and patriotism. It's really interesting how it's just a small commercial.
Yeah, rewatching it the other day, I found it was quite emotional.
Yeah.
As it was back when it first came out, yeah. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather's back just before 7 to keep us up to date on what's happening this morning in our world and here at home. Abby's here with a look at the weather across Manitoba.
Yeah, the province will experience mostly clear skies to start and then plenty of sunshine in the forecast for the south, but a mix of clouds and light snow will be moving in later in the evening. For the northern region, we're already tracking snow in that part of the province. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures around -8 at this time. Mainly clear conditions you're seeing. As mentioned earlier, expect plenty of sunshine today. It gets a little bit windy at some point. Our highs would get to -4. Tonight we'll see some cloud cover, and then there's chance of light snow expected later before it clears in the morning. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region from Morden, Morris, Winkler all the way down to Altona. Temperatures also hovering around -7, -8, mainly clear there. The day will be sunny and you also warm up to around -4. Now we head west to Brandon, where we're seeing temperatures around -13 and clear conditions. Expect increasing clouds and a breezy west wind will be coming your way. You warm up to around -3 today. In the Parkland region, Dauphin and surrounding regions, we're seeing temperatures around -12, -13 at this time. Expect plenty of sunshine today. Light snow will be developing later. The high will get to -4 with some light winds also coming your way. And then tonight the snow would end and you dip to around -16. In the Interlake region, we're seeing Gimli at -13, partly cloudy there. Sunny sunshine in the forecast for you today. Some clouds will roll in later in the afternoon. Your highs would be around -5. In the central regions and then tracking it into the Par and Flin Flon, we're seeing temperatures hover between -22 and -23 in some areas. Expect light winds, highs around -10. The wind chill will be feeling like -29 this morning. And for tonight, the temperatures will be dropping to around -21. Moving on to Thompson and Churchill, both hovering between -17, -18. And now we will see snow in that part of the province. And wind chill, we're looking at wind chills in Thompson around -29 and wind chill in Churchill -36. So mainly clear down south, but we're seeing snow up north.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Full look at Manitoba weather this morning and checking traffic for us. Here's Corey.
Really quiet commute overall. But if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, do give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Right now, let's find out what's happening in the world of business. And Crystalie Ramlakan is with us again this morning. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Margot.
So automakers will get a month-long tariff exemption from those U.S. tariffs. That was announced yesterday, just a day after the sweeping levies on Canadian and Mexican imports were imposed. How are the markets reacting?
Well, Canada's main stock index went up, led by base metals, industrials, and technology, and U.S. markets have also gained. So markets were flat before sharply rising in, kind of a sigh of relief over indications that President Donald Trump's tariffs are not completely absolute. So Trump decided to delay the 25% tariffs for vehicles coming through the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement on trade. And markets recovered a good chunk of what they lost Tuesday after tariffs were implemented. And shares in automakers have also jumped. However, the path ahead is still unclear, with sectors now clamoring for exemptions and more tariff deadlines still to come. And market volatility is expected to continue with the uncertainty. And market experts say, regardless of what actually happens, all of this unknown is bad for the economy because businesses and consumers will delay decision-making, spending, and investments. Now, there could be a little bit of a silver lining here. Both the Bank of Canada and the U.S. Federal Reserve are likely to cut interest rates more this year than they would have otherwise. But that will also be to just counteract the hits to the economies.
Right. And we're hearing even hockey could be affected by the tariffs.
Yes. So NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says any negative effects on the Canadian dollar caused by tariffs could be painful for the league. Bettman told CNBC the NHL's 7 Canadian clubs perform well and account for a quarter of the league's revenue. But he said a drop in the Canadian dollar relative to its American counterpart could cause difficulties as Canadian teams pay their players in U.S. dollars. So the political tension between Canada and the U.S. made for, some drama at the recent Four Nations face-off in Montreal and Boston. Now, Bettman says he has not spoken to the Trump administration about all of this, but he says he believes any animosity between the two countries relates to a policy issue with people caught in the middle.
And some provinces, including Manitoba, are taking American liquor off of store shelves in retaliation against the tariffs. What's been the reaction, Crystalie, to that?
Well, the maker of Jack Daniel's says seeing its products removed is worse than a tariff because it's literally taking sales away. And the company's CEO says it is a disproportionate response to tariffs from the Trump administration. But the alcohol company says Canada only accounts for 1% of sales and can withstand the hit. Now, Canada has also imposed 25% tariffs on some goods imported from the U.S., including wine, spirits, and beer. But, the company is really watching for what happens in Mexico, though, which makes up 7% of its sales. Now, the business has been reeling from a slowdown in demand so far this year as well, a trend that we have been seeing in the broader spirits industry. And the company has been trying to cut costs, including it's been, reducing its workforce. But the company says it feels like it's going to be okay. It's, put out a pretty positive outlook this week, and it still expects sales growth of 2 to 4% this year.
And what's happening on the market so far this morning?
In Europe, markets are lower ahead of an expected cut from the European Central Bank. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is down. In Asia, markets are mostly higher after some tariff delays from Trump. So Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 41 cents to 66.72 US per barrel. Gold is down 15.80 to $2,902.90 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.07 of a cent to 69.7 cents US.
Crystalie, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Margot.
Have a good day.
You too.
Crystalie Ramlakan with our business report. If you're just joining us, good morning. -8 degrees at the Forks. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy this morning, and you're with Information Radio. Manitoba's opposition Progressive Conservatives apologized to the families of 4 First Nations women yesterday. Its interim leader, Wayne Iwasco, apologized for refusing to search the landfill for the murder victims of serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky while his party was in power. Last week, the NDP government announced the search at the Prairie Green landfill found possible human remains. CBC's Graham Seaver-Freilich spoke with Cambria Harris, daughter of one of the victims, Morgan Harris. He asked her what she thought of the apology. Here's what she had to say.
I guess I would say I'm feeling very conflicted feelings right now because I filed a complaint of discrimination against the Progressive Conservative Party just over a year ago. And so I find it interesting to know that an apology was released publicly when this complaint of discrimination was inadequately swept under the rug to the eyes of the public and denied actually by the Progressive Conservative Party. So I question why they're apologizing publicly when they had the chance to mediate with me privately. So I wonder if they're apologizing because they're genuinely sorry, or is it to save face because we were right and they were wrong?
Have they reached out to you at all in this?
No, absolutely not. I've reached every avenue to seek any sort of accountability. And so I acknowledge the apology that was made today. But, if it wasn't for those actions of the previous PC government, my family wouldn't have been standing at the landfill today waiting for our loved ones to be brought home. We're doing the work that they said couldn't initially be done from the very beginning. And my family was used for a political campaign at that, where they blasted billboards in all the spots that my mom was last seen. And it caused severe emotional amounts of distress, not only to my family, but to the community. Their words, they're just mere words right now, and until I see actions and healing within us as a people, but also within a government, I will question their apology for now unless they want to prove me otherwise.
Has anyone on the PC camp at all reached out, or just across the board there's been nothing?
It's been absolutely nothing. Anything that has been said publicly. And it's sad because what had happened previously caused a divide within our people and us as Manitobans. And so now we have to repair that broken relationship for something that they had done. And so I hope they reap the courses of their actions.
What would you like to see happen next?
Transformative change, but that's a far fetch for the PC government. Apologizing is one thing, but actually taking accountability and changing your actions to ensure tragedy doesn't happen like that again. We'll say otherwise.
In terms of everything that maybe you've seen the NDP government do or say, have you do you have any reaction to what you've seen from that side?
I can definitely say that the work isn't done yet, and outside of MMIWG2S+, I will continue to advocate for all causes and all people. And so I think it's important to just continue highlighting what issues we have at hand right now and continuing to lift the forefronts of voices and movements like we have been doing for the last 2 years. At the end of the day, they will never ever understand the amount of pain that our families have to go through, the amount of struggle that we have to go through as Indigenous people. We had to fight a whole system just because of them in order to bring our loved ones home. And they will never be able to wrap their heads around that.
And that is Cambria Harris, the daughter of Morgan Harris. She spoke with the CBC's Graham Sevier-Freilich. It is 6:47. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. We're looking at a sunny day, but still windy at times, so we will feel that wind chill. Some light snow coming for us tonight, and then tomorrow, back to sunshine. Right now it is -8 degrees at the Forks. Comfy songs recorded in comfy places. That's how the Brothers Landreth created their EP, For You, live. They set up in comfortable places, the front porch, the backyard, their own living room, and just performed together. Here now, recorded live, is the Brothers Landreth performing Leonard Cohen's classic song, Bird on a Wire.
Like a bird on a wire, like a drunk in some midnight choir, I have tried in my own ways to be free. Like a worm on a hook, like some night in an old-fashioned book, I have saved all my ribbons for thee. And if I have been unkind, hope that you can let it go by. And if I have been untrue, I hope you know it wasn't ever for you. Like a baby stillborn, like a beast in his horn, I have torn everyone who's reached out for me. And I swear by this song and all that I have done wrong, I will make it all up to thee.
Recorded live off the floor, that was the Brothers Landreth and their version of Leonard Cohen's Bird on a Wire. Farmers and agriculture businesses on both sides of the border could have a stormy spring and a cloudy future. It's all part of the ongoing trade battle. For more on this, we have reached Ellen Goodard this morning. She's an agricultural economist at the University of Alberta, and she's in Edmonton. Hi there.
Hi.
How do you think this potential tariff on Canadian agricultural imports will affect our farmers this spring?
In many cases, it's the U.S. tariff that's going to have a bigger impact on Canadian farmers because we export so much of what we produce. In some commodity sectors, we export about 60% of what we produce. It's massive. The bigger impact of the Canadian tariffs will be on prices at the grocery store and at restaurants, I think.
We saw yesterday that tariffs were exempted for a month for some automotive makers. How do you think this uncertain situation with tariffs on some products one day and not on another, how will that impact businesses on both sides of the border?
It's huge. It massively increases the uncertainty about what you're going to get when you finally get your product out. That's the thing about agriculture. You can't decide today to increase production tomorrow. And with that uncertainty comes a reluctance to make investment in growing your business, whether it's a processing business or farming. And it may encourage you to not make big capital investments like new buildings or replacing your equipment because you're so uncertain about what your output prices are going to be.
I know we recently spoke with some farmers from Manitoba who were rushing to sell their grain in the U.S. before the tariffs kicked in, and they were very aware of the ticking clock and what all of this could mean for their bottom lines. How quickly do you think Canadian farmers can find new markets if U.S. demand drops?
Well, the thing is, it's not individual farmers that can really organize to find new markets for their products. It's going to have to be collective decision-making at the provincial or sectoral level to facilitate this. We will probably have to expand processing capacity in Canada if we want to increase the demand in Canada for some of our products, like making pasta or things like that within Canada rather than sending the wheat out of the country and importing the pasta back. But realistically, our best chance for establishing long-term markets is outside of Canada, and the logistics of getting products across one ocean or the other, plus dealing with countries that sometimes have different languages, different business practices, different legal arrangements, and establishing a relationship where people trust the quality of your product and the reliability of both suppliers and purchasers. All of that takes time. Is it something that should be done? Yes. Will this give us an impetus to start doing those arrangements? Will the government set up programs to support it? Yes. But it's still not going to move on a dime.
And you were saying it will take time. How much time?
Yeah, well, this is the question. It will depend on the commodity. It will depend on relationships that already exist, say in Asia with suppliers like Australia, because a lot of products that we could export would be similar to those from Australia. Are they going to be willing to take us on? Yes, probably they will, and it will increase competition in some of those markets, but it just can't happen very quickly. If we have some time for our crops, we can start the process of establishing new markets. I've noticed with interest that we've got some new free trade agreements that we haven't operated with for very long yet that we need to start really focusing on, places like Indonesia. But it's all about people and efforts and the capacity to do these business relationship things that will make the whole thing work, and the ability to organize the logistics. One farmer isn't going to fill a ship, so it has to be a bunch of farmers that can get their product to the same location to move it at the same time.
Great to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's Ellen Goodard, an agricultural economist at the University of Alberta. Right now, let's get the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the trade war between the U.S. and Canada has some small business owners worrying about what's ahead. Bela Gurmati at Mermaid Cove Cosmetics in Winnipeg says 28% of their orders last weekend were sent to the U.S. He also imports all their product packaging from the U.S. and says they're going to have to change how they source packaging materials. So we'll hear more about what's ahead for them. And remembering a homicide victim 4 years later. Dozens gathered in a vigil yesterday for Jana Williams. We'll hear from her mother in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Looking at the forecast for Winnipeg today, a high of -4, but with the wind, we will have a wind chill of about -19 for this morning. And then once the sunshine comes out, hopefully we warm up a little bit. We're at -8 degrees right now at the Forks. Traffic-wise, we're not hearing of any major problems so far on the drive into work, but if you do see anything you think others should know about, we welcome your calls at 788-3093. Still to come here on our program, Neighbors Helping Neighbors. We'll hear how one Winnipegger is creating affordable housing for seniors right in her neighborhood. And also, a Winnipeg football club is getting a big boost. We'll find out how that will help get more kids involved in the sport. We're just ahead of World Report here at CBC. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. That's 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margo Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Nice to have you with us, and we'll be back after 7.
On The Current.
This is going to hurt everybody. I'm not buying anything American, period. I will look on the label before I buy it. If it's American, I'll put it back.
Tariffs from the United States have made Canadians angry, but they'll also affect all of our finances. We will answer your practical questions of how we can minimize the impact on our wallets and ease financial fears. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. We begin with another day of confusion and uncertainty in the United States trade war with Canada. People and businesses across the country say U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs are putting them in a dangerous position. Canada's auto sector is watching every move. The White House announced a 1-month exemption for companies covered under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico free trade deal yesterday. But the fear is that the levies would crush domestic manufacturing. My co-host John Northcott is following all of this. And John, where do we stand this morning?
Marcia, increasingly, the challenge for U.S. allies and trading partners is not so much how to respond to the ever-changing tariff threats, but what is the specific threat on any particular day. With the 30-day pause in the tariffs in the auto sector, there was relief on the world stock markets, but the industry still has many questions about what it all means. A phone call between President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau did little to settle the dispute, with, we understand, Trump offering to drop some U.S. tariffs if Canada dropped all of its. The overall rationale for the tariffs was, according to the Trump administration, to combat the influx of fentanyl and migrants from Canada. But increasingly, U.S. officials are suggesting there may be another, much longer-term motive. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
All of this has left Canadian officials wondering what's coming next. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly.
It's not true that we will go through this psychodrama every 30 days. So our goal is to make sure that we're having conversations to bring back much more certainty.
And what about other countries that do business with the U.S.?
Well, Marcia, there's Mexico, also subject to 25% tariffs, and a big part of the automobile supply chain. It says it will announce its own countermeasures this weekend. And China is putting a 15% duty on many U.S. farm exports. China's embassy in Washington ominously posted on X, quote, "If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight to the end," end quote. Marcia?
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
The CBC's John Northcott. As trade walls go up south of the border, premiers are wanting them to come down within Canada. Provincial and territorial leaders see reducing trade barriers as a way to grow GDP. The CBC's Kate McKenna has more on this from Ottawa. And Kate, this push to reduce interprovincial trade barriers is being called unprecedented. What can you tell us about it?
Federal and provincial governments agreed this is the time to remove provincial trade barriers, and they're ready to move quickly. They issued a statement last night saying, among other things, they want to make it easier for workers to travel across the country and have their credentials recognized. Here's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith making that commitment.
My government will enter into free trade and labor mobility agreements with every province that is willing to do so. The goal is to have no exceptions, just free trade and free movement of Canadian workers right across our province.
The statement also says most premiers are ready to remove barriers to alcohol sales, meaning no matter where you are in the country, you could buy wine or beer from any province. This big push on interprovincial trade is an effort to make Canada's economy more resilient in the face of these tariffs. The Minister of Internal Trade, Anita Anand, says eliminating trade barriers could add up to $200 billion to the Canadian GDP. This issue has frustrated business leaders for decades. They say it's easier to trade with the U.S. than within Canadian provinces. We've heard from many premiers a willingness to change this. Representatives are meeting weekly now to lift these trade barriers. But of course, Canada's main goal is and always has been having these tariffs lifted.
All right. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Kate McKenna in Ottawa. Experts warn health care in this country will also be affected by U.S. tariffs. The government of Newfoundland and Labrador has directed its health authority to take a hard look at what it buys. The health minister says it procures 400,000 different items each year. Municipal and Provincial Affairs Minister John Hagee is also a surgeon.
There is going to be a challenge, though, because there's a lot of fairly specialist stuff, and I'm thinking from my background in surgery, particularly cardiac surgery, some of these prostheses are pretty well sole sourced from the States. A lot of orthopedic prostheses come from companies like Stryker. You might have to look at AO, which is a Swiss company instead, or at least used to be. I don't know whether it's been bought out. So there's a lot of untangling going on.
Aggie says it is not clear at this point how much comes from the U.S. European leaders at an emergency summit are focused on defense for the continent and Ukraine. The U.S. is suspending its military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv. And Russia is warning any EU troops on the ground in Ukraine would mean war. The CBC's Anna Cunningham is following developments. And Anna, what have the EU leaders been saying?
Well, Marcia, we've seen all 27 EU nation leaders this morning in Brussels. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is there. Also, he arrived flanked by the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council Chief Antonio Costa. Now, Ursula von der Leyen says this meeting is to cement the EU support for Ukraine and rearm Europe. Take a listen.
This is a watershed moment for Europe. And Ukraine, as part of our European family, it's also a watershed moment for Ukraine. Europe faces a clear and present danger.
The message that we're getting is very much about Europe bolstering its own alliances, certainly in the face of the US administration under President Donald Trump, pivoting away from support for Ukraine. President Zelensky did express his gratitude for European support.
It is great that we are not alone. We feel it and we know it. Thank you so much for everything.
So, Marcia, discussions today certainly centering on boosting the EU defence spending by billions, and that could include investment in the manufacture of weapons on the continent.
What has been the response from Russia to all of this?
Well, you mentioned about the possibility of EU troops as peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow would view that as the official involvement of NATO forces in a war against Russia. He's also responded to the French President Emmanuel Macron's comments, suggesting that France is willing to extend the protection of its own nuclear arsenal to European partners. Lavrov saying that is a threat to Russia, and the Kremlin will be closely watching events in Brussels today.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Marcia.
The CBC's Anna Cunningham in London. A Canadian teenager who admitted to being a Russian spy is in a Polish prison. The federal government is trying to negotiate his transfer home. His mother tells CBC News the 18-year-old was targeted for his military ties and lured to occupied eastern Ukraine. Jonathan Gatehouse has this exclusive story.
He needs to come home. He doesn't belong in a Polish jail.
Andalay Nelson's 17-year-old son, Lakin Pavin, had just left Vancouver for a backpacking trip to Europe when she received an earth-shattering call.
I was told that Lakin had been arrested and charged with espionage against the Polish government.
Polish court documents show the Canadian Army reservist wanted to volunteer for an aid organization in occupied Ukraine. Instead, he was recruited there by Russian intelligence and sent to Warsaw to spy on the Polish military. His espionage career ended hours after he arrived, when he got drunk in a hotel bar and confessed to police.
He turned himself in. He didn't do what they asked him to do, and he knew it was wrong.
Now 18 years old, he was convicted this past December and is serving a 20-month sentence. The family says CSIS and the RCMP had Lakin on their radar before he left. Neither agency would confirm or deny that. Lawyer John Phillips is advising the family.
This is exactly the failing of the Canadian system, the Canadian intelligence and police network. They should have shut this down in Canada, focused on his rehabilitation and reintegration, but instead he's now suffering in a prison.
Global Affairs Canada is in talks with the Polish authorities, and his family hopes Lakin will be home soon. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
My life, my life, my life, my life in the sunshine.
Jazz funk pioneer Roy Ayers has died. A post on his Facebook page says he died March 4th in New York City after a long illness. It goes on to say that he lived a beautiful life and will be sorely missed.
Everybody loves the sunshine.
Ayers developed his signature sound, which featured him on vibraphone with his band Roy Ayers' Ubiquity. His biggest hit, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, introduced many people to this jazz funk. Roy Ayers was 84 years old.
Folks get brown in the sunshine.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margo Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, how a community advocate is creating housing for Winnipeg seniors. Also, tackling financial barriers so that kids can play. We'll hear about a grant for a local youth football club. And economists across the country say that American tariffs could push Canada into a recession. We'll talk to a local economist who says it would be like nothing our country has seen before. This is Information Radio on CBC. With the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom, here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the daughter of one of 4 murdered Indigenous women feels conflicted after yesterday's public apology from the Progressive Conservatives. Interim Tory leader Wayne Iwasko stood in the legislature apologizing to the families. He says the party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families. The Tories, you may recall, refused to search the landfill where it is believed 2 of the bodies had been dumped. Just last week, searchers found potential human remains, which are now being tested. We're going to hear from Cambria Harris coming up. As well, the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association says the trade war is hitting that industry hard. Association CEO Sean Jeffrey says many restaurant owners are still recovering from the pandemic and massive inflation, and tariffs for some, he says, may be the last straw. Those stories and more coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather. And now we turn to Abby Adiyemi with a look at our forecast.
Good morning. Once again, the province will be experiencing mostly clear skies and plenty of sunshine down south, but we're going to be having a mix of sun and clouds, a mix of clouds and light snow rather moving through the evening, especially in the northern regions. Taking a look at conditions in Winnipeg and surrounding areas at this time. -8 in the city. Clear skies we're seeing. Expect plenty of sunshine today with breezy conditions from the west. We warm up to -4 today, and then for later in the evening, clouds will move in with a chance of light snow overnight. That should clear by tomorrow morning, ease into a low of -14. If we do a snapshot of the regions, most of the regions will be sunny. A bit of cold in the south, but up north we're looking at colder temperatures with highs struggling to hit -10 in the Thompson, and then for Churchill that will be staying well below -20 with extreme wind chills factored in. Churchill will be seeing wind chills close to -36 this morning, but for down south we're going to warm up to -3s to -5s in most of the regions. For Winnipeg, a sunny day ahead and warming up to -4.
All right, Abby, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Corey, how's the drive-in?
Got a call on the community line. They said Springfield and Lashmodier, the lights are flashing red, so maybe a bit slower going through that intersection. Treat that, of course, as a 4-way stop. Other than that, haven't heard of any other major issues. Highways are looking all right out there, too. But if you see something going on, if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
For decades, the lot at 55 Harriet Street sat vacant. The spot, located between McDermott and Notre Dame Avenue, was a reflection of inner city decay. But one Winnipegger has been working to change that. During the pandemic, Catherine Collins founded Harriet Street Seniors Housing Incorporated. It's a nonprofit working to create affordable housing for low-income seniors. Today, construction of new housing is nearing completion at 55 Harriet. There will be 49 units in the new building, building, and they should be ready for tenants by this summer. It's a pleasure to have Catherine Collins with us this morning. Good morning, Catherine.
Great to be here and talk about this.
Must feel great to be so close to the end of this project.
Well, it's been a long time, over 5 years, actually more than 5 years, because it was me canvassing the neighborhood about 7 years ago, talking to them about the vacant lot and what we could do with it, and were they interested in pursuing housing and what population, and they said they were interested in senior housing. So that's where it started.
What prompted you to start this in the first place?
Well, I've lived in this area since 1984. And during the time I've been here, I've literally seen hundreds of housing units lost. They could be older homes that get boarded up and they're dilapidated and then they get fires set, or they could be apartment buildings. The development of the Tecumseh Parkade and the pharmacy building on the health sciences campus, that we lost about 100 housing units there. So the whole neighborhood has become sad looking with all these empty lots, and it's time to change that. And now we're actually turning a corner on this, and it's changing for the better.
What was that like at the time, walking around and feeling that sadness in your neighborhood?
Well, it was very demoralizing to everyone who lived here. I actually did a project where I photographed every house in West Alexander, and I have literally probably 1,000 pictures, many of which aren't there anymore. And I lost neighbors too. The houses that are gone were from people that I knew who lived there. So it's, that's sad.
Yeah, not just the properties, but the people, of course, right? What was it about this particular lot that attracted you?
Well, it wasn't a matter of it being attractive. It was a long-time vacant lot, probably had housing on it 60 years ago. One of our board members remembers them as a child, and he's in his early 60s. When I moved here, it was a vacant lot, no houses, and an old garage on it. And it was, it got paved in the 1990s by Canadian Tire, who owned it. They were trying to buy goodwill in the community because they wanted to build, do some demolition of housing on McDermott. And I fought that fight in the early 1990s. That's really how I got into this. So the vacant lot sat there, and it's right behind my home. And over the years, I've had to remove mattresses. I've had to call it about stolen cars. People use it for a place to sit and drink and as a bathroom. So now I won't necessarily have to go out there and clean it up anymore because there's something there.
And tell us, what is there? What, as you look out into your backyard, what do you see?
Well, now I look out and I see the framing for the 3-story building. There's actually 4 floors in it, but I see a 3-story building, which is what's allowable in the secondary plan. The outside hasn't been put on, but they're putting the windows in now, and pretty soon the workers are going to be working inside on the actual units. So
how exciting is that?
Oh, it's been amazing seeing them dig the hole and make the foundation and pour the floors, and every day is something new.
When you started looking at this property, talking to people in your neighborhood about what kind of housing they would like to see, tell me what you heard from people about housing for seniors.
Well, a lot of the people in the neighborhood are seniors, and they're living in older houses, and they don't necessarily want to leave the neighborhood. Some have left, and I know at least 5 seniors that are interested in living in the building. I don't know if I answered that question, but seniors are one population that's facing homelessness increasingly because they're on fixed incomes. Rents go up, all the costs surrounding that go up. They have medication and increases, and things can happen where they get unexpected expenses, like having to buy walkers. I went through that myself this year. Having to buy things because I had an accident where I have a broken hip. So that was an expense. And so it's not easy when you're on a fixed income. And it's not easy for older women because older women don't have the same work history of many people, and their CPP isn't as big. So even though they have guaranteed income supplements, it's still a challenge.
So as you say, it was a concern for so many people in your neighborhood, and also it is such a challenging thing to try to find this kind of housing, especially in a community that you already know.
Yes, and we've also had the building designed we have 16 units being built for people that are in wheelchairs. So there's an elevator, and they have, larger turning radii in the kitchen and bathrooms, and the countertops are designed, they're a bit higher. So we're hoping to, be able to accommodate people with disabilities. And we also, of course, have, the rents will be geared to income. So that should be helpful.
You've described some of the challenges you've seen living there for decades in the neighborhood, and we know that there have been fires in vacant buildings in the inner city and downtown areas. How important would you say new housing like this is in a neighborhood like yours?
Well, it's important for the morale of the area, but also the safety. That vacant lot was very unsafe for many, many years, and now it's not going to be. Of course, we'll have to have cameras and watch everything, but that's the life in the inner city. But the more people that are here, there are more people that will be watching.
If anyone, yes, sorry, Catherine, if anyone listening is interested in getting some more information, where can they turn?
Well, at this point, just stay in the news or watch the news, because we're working. We have to find a company. We have to arrange for the management of our building, and we're working on that right now. So I can't say call this or that. It's, what you can do is suggest that they go to Harriet Street. We do have a website.
HarrietStreetSeniors.com.
Yeah, HarrietStreetSeniors.com. You've got it written down there. Yeah, that we'll be posting things there.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the project.
Thank you, and come and take a look.
I will. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. That's Catherine Collins. Goodbye now. Catherine is president of Harriet Street Seniors Housing Incorporated.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
It is 7:22. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC. Tate McRae's recently released album, So Close to What, is topping the Billboard charts this week. Actually makes her the first Canadian woman to lead that list during the 2020s. The Calgary native is also the first woman from Alberta to ever top the chart, and she dethroned another Canadian to take that #1 position. Drake's Some Sexy Songs for You has dropped to the 2nd spot on the chart. From So Close to What, here's Tate with Sports Car. And that is Tate McRae with Sports Car from her Billboard chart-topping new album, So Close to What? Wish I had a sports car. Always wanted a sports car. I had a boyfriend once who had a Mustang, 69 Mustang, metallic blue, beautiful car. He was a nice guy, but I sure missed the car. Let's take a look at morning sports now. Paul McGowan is with us. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Margot.
So let's start at the Briar, where there was a Battle of Manitoba in last night's draw.
Yeah, Reed Carruthers out of the Granite Curling Club against the number 1 ranked team in the country, Matt Dunstone out of the Fort Rouge Curling Club. Both teams came in with just one loss, trying to better secure a playoff spot. And as expected, back and forth for most of the game. After Carruthers missed his final shot in the 8th end, Dunstone was left with a chance to break the game wide open.
Final stone.
Great weight. Good weight. Little wide.
Chance for 4.
Yep. Shot, Matty.
Hand goes up, and we will put up 4.
TSN's Vic Router with the call. I love Vic's calls. That 4-ender proved to be the deciding factor, as after a blank in the next end, Dunstone ran Carruthers out of rocks for the win, 8-6 the final. Now, Dunstone was asked if playing a provincial rival brought an extra edge to the game.
No, I mean, naturally everything's going to be a little bit more fierce, a little bit more fiery just because of that rivalry. But we just had to put together, a full 10-end game, which, we hadn't necessarily done that yet this week. And, today was a step in the right direction. We just grinded, we weathered the storm early in the first 5 and, just took over the game in the last half.
As things stand, both Carruthers and Dunstone are in playoff positions, but that by no means guarantees them a spot. In fact, today's final round-robin game for Dunstone could prove to be the decider. If he beats Brad Gushu, it would mean both teams advance. That game goes at 3:30 this afternoon.
Oh, very exciting. Now, we have the Briar. We also have wheelchair curling happening in Scotland. What's the latest there?
Well, that is the World Championship happening in Scotland. Countries there attempting to earn points to qualify for next winter's Paralympics. Canada has already qualified in 4-person wheelchair curling, but not in mixed doubles, which is a first time, Paralympic event in 2026. Now, Mark Idison and Ina Forrest are the ones who will be trying to earn Canada's way through to Milan.
We're all very proud Canadians, and we work super hard to do our best to represent Canada while we're home and while we're on the road internationally. And Canada's such a great country to play for, and I picture myself all the time on the podium watching the flag raise and listening to our national anthem. So I hope that the upcoming games will get the chance to do that again.
Mark Idison there. He and the Canadian rank ranked 7th heading into this tournament, and only the top 8 teams qualify to go to Italy. So a lot riding on what they're able to do in Scotland.
And finally, a little bit of baseball news.
The Major League Baseball season just 3 weeks away. But in the meantime, if you want a taste of summer, you have spring training down in Florida. You also have U.S. college baseball, which can be good, but it can also sometimes be this.
As James Quiniron steps in, and that's going to be a record-breaking inning. 23 runs for George Mason here in this inning.
You heard that correctly.
Oh.
Yeah, George Mason University scores 23 runs, all of them coming with 1 out in the bottom of the 2nd inning. That is against Holy Cross College. There are so many wrinkles to this. My favorite stat of that inning, though, is that all 23 runs came in without a home run being hit.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I think whatever your worst sports memory is, it is not as bad as giving up 23 runs in 1 inning.
That would be hard to come back from. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Margot.
Paul McGowan with a look at CBC Sports.
Here's to the bowl. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
Still to come here on the program, a Winnipeg Football Club is getting a big boost. We'll find out how that is going to help get more children involved in the sport of football. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. Time now for the CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's -9. Grab those shades. It's going to be a sunny day, a bit of a westerly breeze, and a high this afternoon of -4. Cambria Harris has conflicted feelings about an apology from the interim Progressive Conservative leader over the way his party handled requests to search the landfill. Wayne Iwasko issued a public apology in the legislature yesterday. He says his party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families of 4 Indigenous women who were murdered. The Tories refused to search the landfill where it's believed 2 of the bodies were dumped. Just last week, searchers found potential human remains, which are now being tested. Harris wonders about the timing of this apology.
I question why they're apologizing publicly when they had the chance to mediate with me privately. So I wonder if they're apologizing because they're genuinely sorry, or is it to save face because we were right and they were wrong?
Harris says the apology also seems less sincere because it was done in public. The trade war between the U.S. and Canada has some small business owners in this province worried about what's ahead. Bela Gurmadi co-owns Mermaid Cove Cosmetics with his mother in Winnipeg. He says 28% of their orders last weekend were sent to the U.S. He also imports all their product packaging from the U.S. Gurmadi says they will have to change how they source packaging materials.
We've overhauled our supply chain management to exclusively source our packaging, to source our marketing materials all locally within Winnipeg. And we've also looked into the raw ingredients that we use and source it from Canadian companies.
3 of the Mermaid Cove's products were included in this year's nominee gift bags at the Oscars. Gurmadi says they will consider doing that again for next year's award show, despite the trade war. Well, as tariffs add to the cost of certain ingredients from the United States, a Winnipeg restaurant is making some changes. U.S. produce is used in almost every menu item at Peasant Cookery in the Exchange. General Manager Flora Giordani says they'll now be looking to buy local, like sourcing tomatoes from a greenhouse in the Dauphin area.
I feel like in Canada we have everything we need in our country. We don't need to source from other places other than things that we can't get through the winter or, but we have greenhouses. We have so many things coming into plan right now that I don't think we need outside help to make this country work.
Peasant Cookery already gets most of its meat and seafood from Canada, and it's going to be doing the same with produce. Giordani says that means the menu will have to change frequently as different items become available. Now, the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association says this trade war is hitting the industry hard. Association CEO Sean Jeffrey says his members are scrambling to change their orders to avoid products from the U.S. He says many restaurant owners are still recovering from the pandemic, and massive inflation increases as well as the tariffs may be a final straw.
We don't know how long this is going to last. Obviously, the uncertainty with the counterparts in the U.S. is just mind-blowing. But, that uncertainty is that final nail in the coffin that an operator just says enough's enough. I just can't do this anymore.
Jeffrey says the provincial government has been good at communicating with the industry, but he says more needs to be done to help them survive. With Canada now in a trade war with the U.S., the Prime Minister and Premiers have opened talks on what can be done to boost trade within our own borders, and that includes goods and labor. Among issues being looked at are credentialed certified professionals' need to work outside their home province. Provincial trade and labor ministers have been directed to come up with a national credential plan by June 1st. A mother in pursuit of justice. A vigil to honor the memory of Jana Williams. Her remains were found outside an apartment building on March of 2021, and yesterday dozens walked down Main Street from Inkster to Alford. In the 4 years since Jana's death, little is known about who was responsible. Charlene Williams is Jana's mother.
I want some peace, and I want closure. I want justice for my daughter. That's what I really want. It's tough. It's really tough right now.
Jana left behind 3 children. Williams says her daughter was also 6 months pregnant when she died. Her unborn child, known as Hummingbird, was also remembered at yesterday's vigil. Defense Minister Bill Blair is going to make an announcement today in Iqaluit about the future of Canadian armed forces in the Arctic. The announcement comes as foreign analysts agree it is a critical time for Canada's military presence across the region. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly said in a foreign policy statement last year, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made Arctic cooperation with Moscow, quote, exceedingly difficult for the foreseeable future. You can hear more on this story, as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. And as always, you can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at our forecast now. Here's Abby.
Good morning once again. Mainly clear in southern regions. We're expecting sunny skies, but colder temperatures will creep in at some point with light snow expected later in the day in some areas. The north still seeing drifting snow in Thompson at this time. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures around -9. Expect a sunny day from the west. We're going to get some breezy, it's going to be breezy from the west. We warm up to -4 later today. Tonight, some clouds will roll in with light snow possible overnight. Similar conditions we are seeing in the Pembina Valley region from Morden all the way down to Altona. Currently, temperatures around -8, -9. Sunshine in the forecast, warming up to -4. Heading west to Brandon, temperatures around -15. Clear conditions we have there. We will see some clouds roll in as the day goes on. The high would be around -3. Dauphin is at -12 at this time, also seeing clear skies. For the Parkland region today, expect sunny weather. However, the clouds will increase later in the day, followed by some light snow. You do warm up to -4 for folks in that part of the province. In the Interlake region, we see partly cloudy skies with Gimli sitting at -16 at this time. Expect some sunny conditions today. However, the clouds will also be rolling in sometime in the afternoon. Highs will be near -5. The Power Flin Flon, we're looking at temperatures around -21 at this time. We saw some cloudy conditions earlier. That should clear as you get into the morning. Light winds will follow that. High will be around -10. The wind chill makes it feel colder. For Thompson and Churchill, we're seeing temperatures hover between -17 and -16 with light snow drifting in Thompson and just mostly cloudy conditions in Churchill. The wind chill for Churchill feels like -36, 37 this morning. But for the southern region, we're going to be mild. It's going to be sunny and snow possible later in the day.
All right. Thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey is watching the commute for us.
I come bearing only good news today. Lashmortia and Springfield, the lights were flashing red, but now they are no longer flashing red. No delays. That seems to be the only issue. Seems like things are going fairly smoothly out there, but curious if there's any new potholes that have popped up, as they tend to do this time of year. Give me a call if you see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, some kids in the North End are looking forward to having more access to sports thanks to some new funding. CBC community reporter Shanna Lee Vidal has the details.
Well, football might be on a winter break right now. There's already one team that scored a touchdown. I'm Shanna Lee Vidal, and I'm here at the North Winnipeg Nomads Football Club. The club is one of 3 recipients of the NFL Forward Pass. The $25,000 grant from NFL Canada is going to help grow the sport in Winnipeg by removing financial barriers.
My name is Stacey Kewen. I'm the president of the North Winnipeg Nomads. I also coach the U14 Pee Wee team. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that we actually applied for the grant. It was done by one of our parents. And then when I found out, it was a little shock and surprise at the same time, and a little bit of excitement as well. We're going to use it to help kids get on the field as far as registration fees and that kind of thing. That was my head coach.
Kewen joined the club in 2015 when his son started playing. Now he's helping coach boys and girls on and off the field, from ages 8 all the way up to 23.
Over the years, I've seen kids and parents come to us, and football has been a real change in their lives. It builds confidence and self-esteem, and they make friends where, in the past maybe they weren't the most social person, but it forces them out, and with the team environment and the family bonds that we form, it changes kids for the better. Are you excited about this year?
Yeah. Calder Weeb is 11 years old and has been playing for 3 years. His favorite position is quarterback. He grew up with a love of the sport because his dad played it. Now his older brother and younger sister are also players.
Just runs in our family and it's fun. Getting to run around and getting exercise.
What is your favorite part about when you're playing against other teams?
Getting to kick their butts.
How does that make you feel knowing that other kids like yourself are going to be able to play this sport and maybe they wouldn't have been able to otherwise?
It makes me happy because I love football and I hope other kids do too.
Well, last year we had 126 players for the MMFA season. I would like to see 200, 300 kids, playing over the next couple of years. Football has been growing over the last couple of years, especially since after COVID. I'd like to see that grow again. Football, like I said, is the best sport in the world, and kids learn a lot, and it's the sport that's going to help them develop that. It's the ultimate team sport. It takes everybody doing their job, everybody working together to be successful, and it really creates a family environment.
Go Nomads!
The North Winnipeg Nomads Football Club will be receiving that grant money this spring, along with a tailgate party and a visit from the NFL. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That's so exciting. Go Nomads. The Nomads football season kicks off in May and runs through the fall.
Rubik's, Jigsaw, Wordle? Hardly. Get ready, Canada. It's time for another edition of That's Puzzling. Host Pia Chattopadhyay competes against one familiar voice and one clever listener in a battle of brain games devised by puzzle master Peter Brown. That's Puzzling on the Sunday Magazine. Sunday morning at 9:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
It is 7:41. Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio here on the CBC. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa, who's off today. And we're looking at a pretty nice day, as Abby was telling us. Sunshine. Once the wind calms down, that wind chill will decrease during the day. We're at -8 degrees right now at the Forks. Still to come here on the program, Ottawa and the provinces have reached a deal to lift the interprovincial trade barriers on alcohol. Now, coming up after 8 o'clock, we'll speak with one of the owners of a local distillery who says up until now, it was easier to sell to the U.S. than to try to sell to other provinces. We'll learn more about that story coming up after 8 o'clock. Right now, we have some contest winners to announce and congratulate. Corey Funk is back with us.
Yes, so yesterday on the show, we had 2 tickets to give away to the Love Local event coming up in a couple weeks, and we were asking people to email in with your favorite local product. So tell us about that. And overwhelmingly, because we're human, it was food.
Of course. Absolutely.
And so I have 2 winners to announce. You each get a ticket to Love Local, the Love Local event full of lots of local vendors going on. So Ryan is one of our winners. He told us about Tiny Monster Seeds, which makes seeds based right out of here in Manitoba, as well as Diana mentioned Cook Creek Kimchi, as well as Borden's Chocolate, a classic.
I've had the kimchi.
Oh, really?
It's very good.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yes.
Ooh, now I just want kimchi. But also just some shout outs to, just in terms of just themes. We heard a lot about new Bothwell cheese.
Right.
La Cochina chips, which I know we were talking about. They're sneaky because the packaging looks like they were made in Mexico, but they're actually made in St. Anne's, Manitoba. So I don't know if have you heard of La Cochina chips?
I've heard of them, but I haven't had them. These are corn chips, right?
I guarantee you've probably seen them. They're in all the grocery stores there, but they're actually, they look, they're like kind of, I don't know if actually they're corn chips, but they look like your classic, like things you would maybe get in Mexico, but they're made in Manitoba. So
nice.
And there's also wild rice made right here in Manitoba, as well as smack dab mustard is another, a few people mentioned that as well. So thanks to everyone who emailed in and told us about that. And Ryan and Diana, you'll be getting those tickets emailed to you shortly.
All right. Congratulations. And thanks again for all of your entries. And now we are officially hungry. All right. Chris Ulrich is a Winnipeg musician originally from the Lac du Bonnet region. His 2017 EP, Moonshine, touches on his upbringing in the area, where he graduated from Lac du Bonnet Senior School. And he credits music teachers Darcy McLean, David Westall, and Sean Keith with getting him on the road to building a career in music. The song Whiskey and the Piano references his grandparents who lived in Whitemouth. Let's take a listen.
In a dusty old basement, in a dusty old town, miles of prairie sky kissing the ground. It's a rusted out flatbed in an overgrown yard. Hear that whistle cry one more time and think, where have the days gone, and when did we grow so old? Why did I ever think that this would be different? When our clock winds down, and we rush through the days, and the calendar flies. People come and seasons go, like the ever-changing skies. It's an oil-stained floor in an empty garage. Hear that motor turn one more time and think, where have the days gone, and when did we grow so old? Why did I ever think that this would be different? When our clock winds down, no one told me it would be this hard. Letting go a life that I remember fighting for. Stolen horses in a car and booze in the piano. And finally cut cigar. Close your eyes in that old ragged chair and smile. And think, where have the days gone, and when did we grow so old? Why did I ever think that this would be different? This would be different. This would be different. When our clock winds down, when our clock winds down.
That is Chris Ulrich with Whiskey in the Piano. It is 7:48. U.S. President Donald Trump's long-threatened tariffs on Canadian goods went into effect this week. Some economists in our country are cautioning people that a recession could be around the corner. Canada is no stranger to recessions, but if the economy slips into a recession, it will be completely different from previous ones. That's according to our next guest. Fletcher Berger is an economics professor at the University of Manitoba. We have reached him on Zoom this morning. Hi there.
Good morning.
Let's start with a definition, first of all, what exactly it means when we have a recession.
Well, there's a formal definition, and usually the growth of the economy, and the economy is producing goods and services, and that's usually growing, and that's usually measured by output, and the usual indicator of output is GDP or real GDP. And a recession is when real GDP, rather than growing, is actually falling. And the technical definition is that if it falls for 2 consecutive quarters, and a quarter being a quarter of a year, so a 3-month period, so if it falls then basically for 6 months running consecutively, that's officially defined as a recession. A more informal sort of view is that even if it's fallen for 6 months and then it just sort of stagnates, so it's not falling, but it's not really bouncing back, then we would sort of say, well, that we're still in a recession, so it could actually last longer than the sort of technical definition. But that's what economists tend to look for. What's happening to growth in the economy is measured by what they call real GDP, the real measure of output of goods and services.
And how likely is it, do you think, Professor, that we are about to enter another recession?
Well, I think the probabilities are more than 50%. Again, it's sort of on and off again, tariffs. It's not quite clear how broad that's going to be. It's not quite clear how extensive the Canadian response is going to be. But it's posing big disruption in terms of potential markets, trade flows. It's certainly going to have a chilling effect on business investment plans. And so being able to acquire goods, sell your goods, and making those decisions on new investments, those are things that drive economic growth. And so if those slow down, we could see a slowdown in economic growth. And so a recession, not next week, but say 3 months from now or 6 months from now, is a real possibility. I would say it's better than a 50% chance.
How tricky does it get for experts such as yourself to make predictions with things changing so quickly, day by day, hour by hour? Just last night we heard that Ottawa has reached a deal with most of the provinces to allow Canadian booze to flow more freely, not to flee, to flow more freely across the country, just as U.S. liquor was being pulled off store shelves. So much happening. Have you ever seen a situation quite like this?
No, there's never, certainly I think in living memory, there hasn't really been a situation at all like this. Canada has had economic recessions before. The most recent one was starting in March 2020, so just about five years ago. But that was brought about by a completely different set of circumstances. That was the pandemic. Again, it was fairly unknown territory for most of us. How long would the restrictions last? How extensive would they be? How's that going to change? All sorts of economic and social behavior. But that was very different from a situation now where it's essentially putting up trade barriers and cutting off traditional access to markets or access to suppliers. So this is very different. And the previous recession prior to the pandemic was way back in 2008, but that was brought about by financial collapse in financial markets and the mortgage market, primarily the United States, and that sort of then rippled through international financial markets, and Canada was sort of caught up in that. So the last two recessions prior to where we are right now have been completely different. But this one, I think, is very, very hard to predict because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the economy that would precipitate a recession in the absence of these potential policy moves by the United States and then the responses by Canada.
When we talk about recession, often people will bring up the 80s and what people experienced during that time. How would you compare back then to now?
Well, again, I think the 80s, in some ways, the 80s was more of a, I'll say, a more classical or standard type of recession. Partly what precipitated that was that there was concern with very high levels of inflation, especially in the late 70s. And so there was a very strong policy response to try to cool off the economy and get inflation, as the phrase went, under control. And central banks were acting very aggressively, raising interest rates to double-digit levels to really cool off the economy. And they succeeded. It cooled off the economy to a pretty big extent. In Canada, in 1982, for example, real GDP actually dropped by 3.2% over the course of that year. That's a big drop. And unemployment, of course, was way up, and businesses were struggling, increased bankruptcies, etc. So, but in some ways, that's sort of a classic policy response to a previous period where maybe the economy was overheating or prices were getting out of control, and so there were some reactions to that. I should add that the 1982 recession was very deep, but the economy bounced back fairly quickly in 1983-84. We had another similar recession in the early 90s, and at that time, the economy sort of stagnated for another year, even after we were technically out of the recession. But those were more, I'll say more classical, more conventional types. This one, again, we don't really know if the tariffs are here to stay, and if they're perhaps being escalated, then the impact on the economy is going to be deeper and more profounder, and it's going to take a longer period of time for businesses to adjust.
And who might be hit the hardest here in Manitoba?
Well, I think that, first of all, those businesses that specifically have directed a lot of their sales and their markets to customers in the United States, if that market is closed off, or essentially they're forced to try to compete with prices that are 25% higher, for example, that's going to be really hard for some of them. Among Manitoba businesses like that, hog producers, Manitoba sells about $200 million worth of live hogs to the United States. And if those prices go up to 25%, American buyers will look elsewhere. So those businesses will have the hardest impact initially. Secondly, will be other Manitoba manufacturers that are importing various goods and services from the United States that are maybe using those for inputs in their production processes. If there's countervailing tariffs imposed by Canada, then those costs are going to go up, and so they're going to have to figure out whether to absorb those costs or find alternative sources of supply, and that's going to take some period of adjustment. That would be the first line of sort of businesses or parts of the economy that would be exposed. Certainly, consumers will see some things in terms of higher prices, but in general, consumers may have a few more choices, at least in the short run, or postpone some expenditures, at least in the short run.
Professor, thanks so much for your time this morning.
You're very welcome.
Okay, take care. That is Fletcher Berriger, an associate professor of economics at the University of Manitoba. Right now, our time is 7:57. Let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the daughter of one of 4 murdered Indigenous women feels convicted after yesterday's public apology from the Progressive Conservatives. Interim Tory leader Wayne Iwasko stood in the legislature apologizing to the families. He says his party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families. The Tories refused to search the landfill where it was believed 2 of the bodies had been dumped. Just last week, searchers found potential human remains, which are now being tested. We're going to hear from Cambria Harris, the daughter of one of the women, coming up. And remembering a homicide victim 4 years later, dozens gathered in a vigil yesterday for Jana Williams. We'll hear from her mother in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Looking at the forecast for Winnipeg, we're looking at a sunny day with a high of -4. We will have wind chill values around -19, though, for this morning. That will lessen by this afternoon. For tonight, increasing cloud, good chance of light snow again late this evening and after midnight, a low of -14. For tomorrow, sunshine again and a high of -5. Right now, -8 degrees at the Forks. Still to come here on the program, we'll hear how the owner of a Winnipeg trucking company is already feeling the effects of those tariffs. The World Report is up next, and Information Radio continues after 8 o'clock.
Today on Q.
The actor Amanda Seyfried got a lot of attention for starring in the movie Mean Girls and then singing ABBA in Mamma Mia. Everything changed when she got cast in a movie by the director Adam Egoyan. Amanda will tell you how it was Canadian film that changed her life and gave her dream career.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. and on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Tariffs in the United States have made Canadians angry, but they'll also affect all of our finances. We will answer your practical questions of how we can minimize the impact on our wallets and ease financial fears. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Industries in Canada are looking for clarity from the Trump administration on the newly imposed tariffs. It is day 3 of the trade war between Canada and the U.S. There's more confusion. The auto industry has already been granted a 1-month reprieve. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington, and Richard, farmers in the U.S. are also hoping for some tariff relief. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Republican lawmakers from those deep red farm country states are pressuring the White House to exempt agricultural products from those 25% tariffs, including Canadian potash, which is a key ingredient in fertilizer. Now, they're concerned tariffs could lead to a supply shortage or price hikes that would drive up food prices. The Agriculture Secretary says it's being considered, but that wildly contradicts the message from Vice President J.D. Vance, who said his boss, President Donald Trump, is not interested in specific exemptions to specific sectors.
He doesn't want to have 500 different industries getting 500 different carve-outs. And the way to avoid application of the tariffs is to have your factory and have your facility in the United States of America. That is the way. Invest in America.
Now, you'll recall Trump paused the upcoming tariffs on all car imports built under the USMCA trade agreement for a month. This came after he heard concerns from the big 3 automakers. So while this mixed messaging from the White House is adding more confusion for Canadian and Mexican negotiators, it does signal this administration is willing to make critical policy decisions on a dime. Some might call it the art of the deal.
You mentioned the auto industry, but what's the status of the carve-outs for other sectors?
Yeah, so the White House press secretary says Trump is open to hearing of additional exemptions, saying the president is always and has always been having open dialogue. But then she quickly said Trump's reciprocal tariffs will still take effect next month with no exceptions. So all this volatility is being reflected by the markets. That's either plunged or inched up in reaction to each tariff update. I think the news site Axios sums it up best, saying it's not just the actual tariffs that pose a risk to the economy, but the uncertainty of their implementation.
Thank you, Richard.
Anytime. Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Canada's forestry industry is also eyeing the tariffs with concern. In New Brunswick, a number of forest mill towns are on edge. 92% of the province's exports go south of the border, the most of any province or territory. The CBC's Jacques Poitras has that story.
The forest is the blood that flows in our veins, according to Eric Gagnon, the mayor of Kedgwick, a rural community of 2,300 people with 2 major sawmills.
Now we are very nervous, but it's not of our control.
You will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one.
Donald Trump's tariff lands on top of an existing 14.4% duty on softwood for most Canadian producers, a duty his administration is seeking to increase later this year to 26.8%. That's a total of almost 52%, with even more duties possible using national security as a rationale. U.S. wood products economist Dustin Jalbert says some Canadian mills could close.
There's really not many Canadian softwood lumber mills that are going to be able to ship profitably into the U.S. market with, at the existing prices.
Canadian softwood's been losing market share in the U.S. for years, in part because of those duties. But Jalbert says it would take years to ramp up enough American supply to replace it. So for now, some mills should survive as U.S. buyers are forced to pay higher prices. Jacques Poitras, CBC News, Fredericton.
If the trade war had a front, it would be Canada's border towns. Hayden Waters visited one. He has more from Fort Erie, Ontario.
Maria Lirio crosses the border every day. She's a dual citizen, living in Ontario, but working just across the river in Buffalo. The tariffs have left her feeling terrible.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a war because I love both countries.
Lirio has noticed less traffic on the Peace Bridge, and she swears Canadian border guards have become more tense. She stopped buying groceries in America.
Oh, it's just sad, it's horrible. I mean, I think Canada is hurting.
Other Fort Erie locals have stopped crossing altogether.
We used to go over quite a bit, have a beer someplace else. We're not going to spend any money over there. We're staying here.
Fort Erie Mayor Wayne Redekop is trying to keep a lid on things, but tensions are high.
When someone that you think is your best friend in the world decides that you should be punished, there is a sense of betrayal.
Redekop says we need to rethink our relationship with America.
Things cannot go back the way they were, and we shouldn't allow them.
He blames Trump, not his neighbors in Buffalo. Hayden Waters, CBC News, Fort Erie, Ontario.
Residents of a South Korean city are demanding answers after 2 fighter jets accidentally bombed the area.
민간 지역에 포탄이 떨어진 사건은
This man is calling for accountability, accusing the Air Force of negligence. The incident happened in Pocheon, near the North Korean border. The military was carrying out a live fire drill. 2 planes strayed outside the firing range and dropped 8 bombs. A church and a number of houses were damaged. No one was killed, but 15 people were injured. A Russian missile attack has targeted Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, killing 4 people. The strike in Kryvyi happened as Zelensky prepares for an emergency meeting with European leaders in Brussels today. Ahead of the summit, France's Emmanuel Macron is warning Europe. Anna Cunningham has more from London.
French President Emmanuel Macron, in a nationwide televised address last night, warning that President Vladimir Putin's Russia violates our borders, making clear peace across Europe was at risk. Its fate, he says, could not be decided by Washington. Today's meeting in Brussels follows a plan by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to rearm Europe. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend, his country now under increased pressure after President Donald Trump suspended US military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv. Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Brez says to ensure peace, countries must invest.
We want to realize that our kids will be able to study, our dreams will be fulfilled, and so on and so forth. So yes, for now, it requires certain investment.
Discussions will centre on a large boost in EU defence spending, including investment in the manufacturing of weapons.
This is about Russia wanting to wipe Ukraine off the map, but it is also about Russia wanting to wipe the current European security order off the map.
Says Fabian Zuleg, Chief Executive at the European Policy Centre.
We will have to collectively defend Ukraine.
Many European nations are expected to be supportive, with the exception of leaders sympathetic to the Kremlin, such as Hungary's Viktor Orban. In a show of the deep level of concern, President Macron has suggested extending the protection offered by France's nuclear arsenal to European partners, something Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says is a threat to Russia. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Patients of a gynecologist in Toronto are furious. They received a notice from Toronto Public Health saying they may have been exposed to infection. As Talia Ricci reports, the letter says it was through improper cleaning of medical instruments.
I felt very violated.
Zara Baksh says a lot went through her mind when she received a letter from Toronto Public Health saying she may have been exposed to bloodborne infections at her gynecologist office.
I mean, I was enraged. I think I spent most of the day just in shock.
The issue was reported at Dr. Esther Park's clinic in the West End of Toronto. Toronto Public Health told CBC News it notified approximately 2,500 patients that received specific procedures between 2020 and 2024 that they might have been exposed to an infection, saying certain bloodborne infections such as hepatitis B and hepatitis C can be passed through the reuse of improperly cleaned instruments. Toronto Public Health says it believes the risk of transmission to be low, but that didn't put Amal Al-Sheikh at ease. She says she was so distraught when she received the notice that she didn't go into work.
So the letter, I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to tell my family.
The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario says it's investigating Dr. Park in relation to infection control issues in her practice. Baksh's test results came back negative, but she still wants answers.
I want to see justice, and I don't know what that looks like.
CBC News contacted the clinic, and a staff member said they wouldn't be providing a comment. The office's answering machine states that Dr. Park is retiring and no longer accepting new patients, and that the clinic will be closing in April. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, we'll hear from a local trucking company that has built its business on shipping across the Manitoba-U.S. border. We'll learn how these new U.S. tariffs are affecting his business right now. And Ottawa and most of the provinces have agreed to lift the barriers that keep booze from flowing more freely across the country. Coming up, we'll hear from the co-owner of a local distillery about the difference that will make for his business. This is Information Radio on CBC. Let's get an update now from our Winnipeg newsroom. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association says this trade war is hitting the industry hard. Association CEO Sean Jeffrey says many restaurant owners are still recovering from the pandemic and massive inflation, and tariffs for some, he says, may be the final straw. Now, Bela Gurmati at Mermaid Cove Cosmetics in Winnipeg says 28% of their orders last weekend were sent to the U.S. He also imports all their product packaging from the U.S. Gurmati says they're going to have to change how they source packaging materials. We'll hear more about how Manitoba small business owners are impacted by this trade war coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather. You're welcome. Let's find out what the weather will be like today.
Yeah, the sun is going to be taking center stage today with clear conditions. A bit of breezy conditions will come from the north, shifting west later on. Right now, -9 and sunny outside. We do warm up to a high of -4 later today. And for tonight, some clouds will roll in, bringing a chance of light snow late in the evening. But don't worry, the skies will clear up before tomorrow morning, and then we'll have a chilly night of a -14. But for Friday, it's going to keep it simple. It's going to be sunny and it's going to be calm.
All right. So don't worry.
Don't worry.
I won't worry. We won't worry. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Taking all the worry away with that forecast. Corey, how's traffic looking?
Very quiet commute overall. Actually, no major issues to report that I've heard of so far. I can tell you those sidewalks are slick still this morning, and doesn't, at least at this point, seem to be the case on the roads, though. But curious if you're out there biking or anything else, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
And we are going to keep Corey with us for our next story. It's been just over 2 days since U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods came into effect. And Corey, I understand you came across a story about how one trucking company is already being affected.
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled upon them in a place I didn't necessarily expect. So I was at the RBC Convention Center yesterday, and that's where RRC Polytech was holding its big Directions business conference for hundreds of business students. And there's actually something called business speed dating going on.
Very nice.
Yeah, so picture this, Margot. So there was like dozens and dozens of these round kind of banquet tables. They were set up in this the massive kind of main hall there at RBC Convention Center. And each one was an industry expert on things like HR, marketing, finance, accounting that work for certain businesses. And every 15 minutes, students kind of gather around and kind of pick their brains about their area of expertise and then kind of move on to another. But what was interesting, as soon as you walk in, you notice there was a cluster of just tables that were just standing room only. And as you get closer, those tables were all tables with signs on them that were around the topic of logistics and supply chain management, which I think historically maybe wasn't the most sexy business topic, but I think since the pandemic and these tariffs, it's what everyone wants to know more about. And one of the experts at those tables was Gurbir Boparai. He's the founder and director of Canadian Prairie Transport, a trucking company, and specializes in shipping a lot of refrigerated foods, perishables, things like that, and also other things like auto parts across the border to the States. He's got about 60 employees, and I just asked him how these tariffs have been impacting his business.
We have multiple number of trucks crossing the border every day into the States. That's kind of our major business model. Yeah.
And what does this business look like in the last couple days?
It's been very challenging. It's uncertain with the things going on with the tariffs right now, and things are changing. Everyone is kind of speculating what's going to happen. It's very uncertain right now, but yeah, we are trying to weather the storm, and yeah, definitely there are some changes.
What are those changes? Are you having orders canceled, or what's happening?
The shipments are being canceled from the States since the tariffs have gone up.
How many orders have you had canceled so far?
We have seen at least 5 to 7 cancellations yesterday, but since the situation is evolving today, and we will see. It's too early to say right now, kind of thing, right? It's just one day. There are a lot of customers who are putting the shipments on hold. They are not allowing us to cross the border with those shipments, and they're just waiting to what happened. We are still just kind of waiting from and updates from our clients what they're going to do with that.
Because you don't know at this point whether these will be a long term, if there will be some kind of deal that these tariffs stop, right? Like, what does this mean for your day to day, and even just like, your employees must be on edge as well, right? If they're not getting work, things like that. What does that all mean for you and your employees?
Well, definitely that is like I said, it's very challenging, and it will have a huge impact. And yeah, I mean, we are kind of watching the situation very closely, what's going to happen, and we hope it is not long term. That's what we are believing. No one wants a trade war. It's not healthy for the business, for the economies, right? It will affect our day-to-day operation in every aspect, because if businesses are doing less business, then they are definitely, consumers are going to consume less products, right? There will be less movement of the freight, right? So, and as far as employees are concerned, we are keeping them updated with whatever is happening, and yeah, of course, it's very uncertain and challenging, and hopefully things should change soon.
Are you noticing the types of products that are being canceled, like in terms of contracts in particular, that U.S. companies are saying like, hey, yeah, like we're holding off for now?
Yeah, we have seen some produce shipments canceled, some auto parts shipments are being canceled, and some agricultural products like seeds and other raw material products that we have seen that have canceled. Yeah, so I think as of now, every industry is kind of holding the shipments, but as the situation evolves, I think we will have a better idea what sort of industries are impacted more, and what. And I mean, what we are thinking is that essentials will keep running, but at the end of the day, it depends, like what kind of deal they make today or tomorrow.
So how long do you think these tariffs will have to last to really do serious damage to your business?
Can't say anything, but I mean, I would say they should end as soon as possible, right? With every day passing, it will do damage a lot, because if tariffs continue for a longer period of time, right? So it means less business will be done within Canada and the US, right? So which means there will be less work for us. Like, less work means less revenue, and less revenue does a lot of damage, right? So they should come to a deal as soon as possible to make sure that businesses are there up and running as soon as possible.
And how worried are you about jobs for your employees?
So right now, like with our clientele base, we are not that concerned right now, but we have a steady business, right? We are not that much concerned, but at the end of the day, every business owner wants to make sure that their employees remain employed with them, right? They don't have to cut off on anything, right? Because workforce is the backbone of any business, right? So as long as the things and the business is doing good, we should be able to keep all those employees intact with us.
There's a crowd gathering around here, so I'll let you go. Anything else you want to add? Wish I'd asked at all? Anything like that?
That's pretty much it, I guess. And I would say again, hope Donald Trump is listening, and they will make a deal with Canada and will end this tariff thing soon, and making it more certain and easier for us to do the business like we have always been doing. U.S. and Canada has been long-standing allies, right? So they have to be friends. They should not be having a war between them, and that's the last thing anyone wants, and we want this to end soon, so the business, logistics and all other business are able to run, and they are able to grow and boom in this economy. We have already faced a recession. We are almost a recession last year, and we are hoping for a recovery this year, and we don't want these things impacting the business anymore.
And that is Gabir Boparai speaking with the CBC's Corey Funk yesterday.
Listen up to groundbreaking sounds. Listen up to new and emerging artists. Listen up to what's happening with your favorite musicians. Subscribe now to CBC Music's newsletter, Listen Up. Keep tabs on everything happening in music. News, exclusive live performances, the best new songs, and so much more. Subscribe now at cbc.ca/listen up.
It is 8:21, minus 9 degrees at the Forks. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio. Up until now, it's been easier for Brock Coots to sell his gin, vodka, whiskey, and other spirits in the U.S. than to get it onto shelves in other provinces. But that could soon change. He is one of the owners of Patent 5 Distillery here in Winnipeg, and late last night, Ottawa and most of the provinces agreed to remove the barriers that keep booze from flowing more freely across the country. We have Brock Coots with us this morning. Hi there.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. What's your reaction to the news?
Guarded optimism, I suppose. I read some information last night. I'm part of the Canadian Craft Distillers Association, and it sort of indicated that the first round would be opening up direct to consumer in the provinces that agree with Ottawa's version of how to help interprovincial trade, which would mean that a customer in Ontario could go online and order a bottle of our vodka, gin, or whiskey, and we could ship directly to their home.
So how big of a deal is that for you and your business?
I would say we very much have a local profile to date in Manitoba, so I suspect that's not going to have a really big impact on us. I think what we're hoping for is that maybe, but this is a pretty big well, it would be a fairly big issue, is that if the provinces said, hey, we're going to support local craft industry across the across Canada, and we're going to facilitate a Patent 5 finding shelf space in Ontario or in BC, that would be awesome. But each of the provinces have a very convoluted bureaucracy with different rules among all the provinces. So for everyone to agree on that, I think would be a bit of a challenge.
So we know that the agreement is still being worked out with details to come over the next few days and weeks. What else would you like to see in any new agreement?
Well, the biggest thing for us, so it's funny that, many of these liquor stores across Canada have taken American products off the shelves, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's an awful lot of American alcohol on the shelves. What do we do about the Canadian industry? In the U.S., producers pay 1/13 the excise tax that we do. So the alcohol industry in Canada is at a massive disadvantage to the U.S. So if the federal government was to step up and say, hey, how do we support having a local industry? that would be the first step for us, is to reduce the excise tax, the federal component that we pay every month based on our sales.
How likely is that, do you think?
You know, there was discussions before Parliament was prorogued. It did feel like we had some momentum. It's just because the federal government, there's going to be a new leader and then probably an election. I just wonder if there's a real strong desire of anyone right now in government to tackle a problem like that. So I would say fairly unlikely.
How much of your product are you selling right now across the border?
None, actually. We had a purchase order that's paused right now because economically, with a 25% tariff, it doesn't make sense.
So overall, what does all of this mean for your business, the tariffs that already exist and what still might be yet to come?
Well, I think it's fantastic for us in Manitoba. I assume that we'll get more shelf space so that they can fill up the shelves. People that are shopping there may not, buy their favorite local product. They may say, their favorite American product. They may try a local product. That will be awesome. There's always, when things like this happen, more of a focus on local, which is great for us. And maybe it starts the discussion nationally about how we support the industry in Canada so that, we have a viable, sustainable industry in our own country.
With things changing so quickly, how do you plan for your business in the coming months?
We haven't really. We've just sort of, we had some plans in place when it looked like the first round of tariffs were going to come in and, at the last minute they got pulled. So for us, it's business as usual. Whiskey has to age for at least 3 years, so there's very little that we can do in the short term to change the direction of our company. So we're gonna promote more for sure. So we'll spend more of our advertising dollars letting people know about us. And if we're able to ship nationally, then we'll figure out if there's a way that we can reasonably let people know in other parts of Canada about our awesome products.
Brock, thanks for joining us this morning.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
That's Brock Coots, one of the owners of Patent 5 Distillery.
Breaking this hour,
CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview. On now.
Well, coming up later here on CBC, it is Radio Noon with Marjorie Dowhouse. Good morning, Marjorie.
Good morning. Did I turn on my mic? Yes, I did.
There you go. It's early. Yes. It's early. It's okay.
Good morning, Margot. How are you?
I think so far so good. Yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, so coming up on Radio Noon today, we are talking about parenting. Yes, parenting styles. You may have heard that there are a couple of trends out there. CBC did a couple articles on them. Gentle parenting or FAFO parenting. And I actually had to look up FAFO parenting, fool around, and find out.
Ooh, the or else strategy.
Yeah. So we're going to open up our lines so that people can ask. We're going to have Alison Schaefer, who is a parenting expert. She's been on CBC before, and she's also an author, to take your questions about parenting. Maybe you have a story to share about parenting. We're seeing a lot of different styles. There's a lot of different talk online about parenting, as well as you're probably seeing some posts from Instagram and influencers out there that may influence how you parent your child. So yes, Alison Schaefer will join us after 12:30 on Radio Noon.
That sounds great. And I know, Corey, you have some little ones, so you're going to be calling in looking for advice.
I'll be dominating the listener line today. Because, it's interesting, right? Like, I've been a parent now for, almost 2.5 years, and I actually deleted Instagram from my phone because of that, because of all the influencers inundating you with how to parent. Like, as soon as the Instagram, like the algorithm finds out,
that's right.
It can get, it's like, here's how to do it, or you're doing it wrong, or don't do this, don't do that. And it was just like, it was overwhelming. I just couldn't handle it. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on parents these days to parent a certain way. And I mean, and it's funny, I was listening to a New York Times podcast about parenting and how actually parenting even as a verb. wasn't really a thing until like maybe the 50s or 60s when, those helping books didn't come. Like parenting was just a thing that you did. There wasn't types of parenting and strategies and things. It was just you grow up, you raise your kids. So it's a very modern thing to be thinking about these strategies, and I think a lot of people are feeling the pressure of that a little bit. And and some there's positive aspects of that. Kids maybe are safer than they used to be, but also there's a lot more pressure to that. So lots to talk about. So I'm looking forward to tuning into that discussion.
Yeah, so you'll have to tune in. 12:30, Corey. Get ready with your questions.
Yeah, I'll already think of all my aliases and masking my voice to come in as different people.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank you.
The CBC's Marjorie Dahos, the host of Radio Noon. Quick check of traffic.
Yeah, actually, we got a call. So I know earlier I said that those lights flashing at Lagimodiere and Springfield were no longer flashing, but I actually got a call from commuter Kim says they are flashing now once again. So something's going on there at that intersection. Might be a bit backed up at Lagimodiere and Springfield. Lights flashing red. Treat it as a four-way stop.
All right. And if you have any updates for us, you can always give Corey a call at 788-3093. The CBC News from Winnipeg is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. Bright start to Thursday. Right now we're at -9. We're going to climb to -4 this afternoon. The daughter of one of 4 murdered Indigenous women feels conflicted after yesterday's public apology from the Progressive Conservatives. Interim Tory leader Wayne Iwasko stood in the legislature apologizing to the families. He says his party lost its way in regards to empathy for the families. The Tories refused to search the landfill where it's believed 2 of the bodies had been dumped. Just last week, searchers found the potential human remains, which are now being tested. Cambria Harris questions the timing of this apology. She also wonders about the sincerity of it being made in public.
Absolutely. When you apologize publicly, it takes away all personality to the situation and reality to the situation because you're not facing it.
Harris says she filed a discrimination complaint against the Tories more than a year ago. She says the party had ample time to mediate with her in private. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Canada's premiers have agreed to reduce barriers to internal trade after the U.S. hit the country with economically devastating tariffs. The White House says Donald Trump is open to other carve-outs after yesterday announcing the auto sector will get a 1-month exemption from duties. Now, small business owners in Winnipeg are concerned about increased costs due to this trade war. Michelle Leclerc owns Wolseley Kombucha. She says their packaging will be directly affected by counter tariffs because all of their bottles come from the U.S. Leclerc says their bottle order shipments are worth thousands of dollars, meaning a hit to their bottom line.
Grab-and-go bottles are probably about, I would say, 40% of our business, and margins are tight. So if it goes up 25%, that's eating 25% of our bottom line for that product. That's a lot.
Leclerc says they may look at different suppliers from countries like China or Mexico to keep costs down. And as tariffs add to the cost of certain ingredients from the United States, a Winnipeg restaurant is making some changes. U.S. produce is used in almost every menu item at Peasant Cookery in the Exchange. General Manager Flora Giordani says now they're going to look to buy local, like sourcing tomatoes from a greenhouse in the Dauphin area.
I feel like in Canada we have everything we need in our country. We don't need to source from other places other than things that we can get through the winter or, but we have greenhouses. We have so many things coming into plan right now that I don't think we need outside help to make this country work.
Peasant Cookery already gets most of its meat and seafood from Canada, and it's going to be doing the same with produce. The Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association says restaurants are struggling with the uncertainty related to the trade war. Association CEO Sean Jeffrey says it's another strain on an industry still in recovery.
Our industry is reeling from the pandemic, still, reeling after years of massive inflation increases. And so I think that, we've really come to a situation where we've absorbed a lot of these cost increases over the last 5 years. How much more can we absorb? And what does that look like in even putting us even more in the red?
Jeffrey says it may not be long before some restaurants are forced to close. He's calling on governments to step up to help the sector survive. In other news, remembering a homicide victim 4 years later.
Thinking of
Dozens at a vigil yesterday for Jana Williams. Her remains were found outside a Winnipeg apartment building on Alfred Avenue in 2021. Her family says the mother of three was expecting another child when she died. Charlene Williams is Jana's mother.
She was an outgoing person. She helped everyone. She loved everyone. And she just loved life and loved her children and loved her family. She loved everyone.
Winnipeg police ruled Jana's death a homicide in 2021, but Williams says it's been years since she last received an update on the case. CBC News has reached out to police, but has not yet heard back. A magnitude 3.9 earthquake has shaken Victoria, BC. Earthquakes Canada says the quake was 42 kilometers deep and was centered near the end of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington state. The tremor was lightly felt in Victoria, and there are no reports of damage. This is, though, at least the third felt earthquake in Victoria, BC in less than 2 weeks. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Final check of our Manitoba weather with Abby.
We're looking at a chilly and sunny day across southern Manitoba, while the north will experience colder temperatures and light snow. For the southern parts, mainly sunny, chilly. Temperatures will be we'll get to warm to like -3 and -5, while western Manitoba will be seeing sunny skies, and Brandon highs of 3 degrees. Northern Manitoba, much colder, highs around -10. The wind chill feels like -36 in Churchill and Thompson this morning. But for Winnipeg, we're expecting a sunny day with a breezy west wind and a high of -4.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Traffic-wise, we've had some traffic lights that have been on again and off again. Where are we at now?
So last morning in Springfield, those lights kind of were flashing red, and then they weren't, and they're flashing red again. But now, just got a call from Larry. There's been a crew there. They have just turned back on and are working normally again for now. So last morning in Springfield should be going smooth sailing from here on in. But that's all. And thanks for everyone who called in today.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Corey Funk, our show director, covering the commute for us. Abby Adiyemi, our technical producer, covering the weather for us. Our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo. Thanks to everyone who worked on the show: Chidi, Ikuma, Issa Kixon, Shanali Vidal, Kalkadan Mulugeta. And thanks to all of you for being here and listening and being part of our little show. I'm Margot Watt, in for Marcy Marcusa. Have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.